Hey everyone, welcome to another quarantine edition of the Adam and Chris Show. I'm St. Adam.
I'm Chris Malice.
And Chris, what are we talking about today?
Well, there's a popular phrase, I guess you could say, around, I guess, some of us music snobs is I like their earlier stuff. So we're doing a 5v5 of bands that their prior records were way better than their output in the last few years. All right.
Yeah, sadly enough, it happens to more bands than we like to admit. And I don't know if it's being a music snob or, it's like, when they're younger, hungrier, you can connect with that. Once they find success, it's hard to identify with a millionaire.
Well, some of these bands I don't think ever went to millionaire status. A couple of them that are on my list, it's just they got into a groove and they stayed there and went autopilot.
I know who you're talking about too. I can't wait for you to talk about them.
All right. Should we go? We both got one honorable mention each. You want to go with yours first?
Dishonorable mention. My problem is I couldn't decide between the two. So I make this, I'm just going to name them both. DevilDriver and Chimera.
Yeah.
I really like their earlier stuff. DevilDriver did an album in 2005, I think it was, The Last Kind Words, which is really, no, that was in 2007, my bad. They did an album in 2005 called In the Hands of Our Maker or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Really good album. I remember just when I used to work at a bar, I'd blast the song End of the Line. Just Run, stuff like that. And really good. Dez from Cold Chamber made this heavier, darker band. I thought they were amazingly talented. And somewhere around the turn of the decade, they just lost me. The same I could say with Chimera. Now, Chimera's case, I think, might be a little different because of all the lineup changes they had. But those first 2-3 albums, I'm like, reminded me of like finding those earlier thrash albums. Everyone knows the song Power Trip, and how can you not love the song Power Trip? Face to face, no time to waste. This is the time for revenge.
I like the one with the choruses. I hate everyone.
Yeah. And somewhere along the way, after all the lineup changes, different influences came in, and in my opinion, it just wasn't as good. I just didn't connect with it. I thought it lost some of the brutality that Chimera brought.
Mm-hmm.
And I just stopped listening to them, at least the newer stuff. I still, like I said, Pass Out of Existence is still on my rotation and everything.
Mm. Well, my band that I'll mention as a dishonorable mention is 6 Feet Under. They didn't just as soon as they hit their peak, which I'd say would be Maximum Violence, which is a pretty good record. They didn't they didn't slowly go downhill. It was like it was a rocket ship down. They flew downhill about as bad as that fucking flat earther who launched himself into space. Okay. Too soon? No, fuck.
I have no idea. Does time exist? I have no idea.
But I mean,
but no, I know what you're talking about with 6 Feet Under. You and I were listening. To their third volume of Graveyard Classics. They covered Slayer and they made it sound bad.
In death metal, if you cannot cover Slayer, you should not be a death metal band. Thrash metal or death metal. If you can't fucking do Slayer, that's basics. You shouldn't be a band.
Right. I mean, if you can't nail Slayer down, I think that goes across the board for all metal bands. If you can't at least do one Slayer cover and
make it listenable,
then you really need to rethink the genre of music you're in.
What happened with them, with 6 Feet, is Chris Barnes, he has the rights to the name. It's his project. former Cannibal Corpse singer. I think it was a little bit before Maximum Violence or after they released Graveyard Classics, and the first one was like an EP with 5 classic songs on there that they covered, which was pretty good. And then they released, I think, 1 or 2 more. And when they started covering AC/DC, it sounded god-awful. They covered TNT.
I don't know. I will defend their cover of Hell's Bells because I thought they made it work. But when you got to the cover of You Shook Me All Night Long, I'm like, wow, they didn't just jump the shark.
Well,
They followed the shark out and rode its corpse, down to the beach.
It made you think, are you guys still a fucking death metal band, or are you guys just trying to be an old school rock cover band? Which is fine, right. But when you hear those barking vocals doing Shook Me All Night Long, it's like, they weren't meant to be sung like that, you fucking morons. 6 feet, 6 feet under. Definitely on that list of Warpath and Haunted were both good records. So is Maximum Violence. But afterwards, man, it was such a downhill slide. It's like, what the fuck were you guys thinking? All right, on to the 5v5. You want to go first?
I'll go first. At number 5, and this hurts me to say it, but I gotta be honest, Metallica.
Metallica was never going to make this list. No way. No way. That wasn't going to ever happen.
What was I thinking? Now, let's be honest. First 4 albums, amazing thrash albums. First 5 albums, either the Black Album and I know some hardcore fans hated it when it first came out. That was in my rotation in middle school and high school and so on and so forth. It's probably their most commercial album, but it was still a good album. Then in 96, they released Load, which was a drastic departure from everything they've done. I like Load and Reload, Reload being the album that came out the following year. I just think it would have worked better as a side project because it was more bluesy and everything. It wasn't that thrash metal that you expected from Metallica. Jason Newsted even said, you get some kid looking at the band lineup, like band pictures from 1991, he's like, that's my Metallica. Then, 5 years later, you look at the lineup on Load, you see like the pictures and they're like, it says Metallica, but I don't recognize these guys. Then of course 2003 rolled around.
What came out that year?
Nothing happened, so we'll move on.
Oh, you want to believe nothing happened.
Saint Anger came out, which not only is the worst Metallica album I've ever heard, it is one of the worst albums I ever heard. And you could say because they were going for a garage band sound, they polished up nothing, took out all the guitar solos. Lars found a snare drum sound that should never have been made in the first place, should never have been replicated.
Well, it was called Shoes and Washer. That's what it was. Bong, bong, ting, ting, ting.
He took the snare off the snare drum. That's how he got that sound.
And they put that up in the mix to a huge degree over almost everything.
You had everyone in the band writing lyrics on this album, stuff. James writing the lyrics. So a lot of the songs were kind of unbalanced because, a little bit of lyrics from here, a little bit of lyrics from here, and so on and so forth. Bob Rock playing bass on it because Newsted left the band 2 years earlier. I mean, it was just, there was a whole lot of bad, which was captured in the film Some Kind of Monster.
Hey, what did Lars' dad say to some of that album that he heard?
I would delete that, which needs to be a soundbite. Needs to be a soundbite used for a lot of like videos of bands making albums. I would delete that. Not a good album. But you know what? They at least admit it. Like Lars called it a sonic abortion. So at least looking back, he's like, yeah, that album sucked. James, said that it just was one-dimensional, and it sounded one-dimensional. I'm like,
it didn't sound one-dimensional. It sounded like shit.
One-dimensional shit. But there are some good ideas on it, I can say that. And had they taken more time to hammer these out and clean them up and put in guitar solos, it would have worked. Not
And
all of the
then
songs on there, but some of them.
and
But
make it sound like they weren't being recorded with an iPhone and it's somebody hitting a tin can in the back.
oh, that'll be a band at some point, I'm sure. But
Multi-million dollar
the
band
reason,
spent millions of dollars to sound like a shitty garage band.
yeah, yeah. But it does have a happy ending. This is why they're so low on this list. The next two albums they released, I thought was, we're miles ahead. Death Magnetic, I loved it. It brought back a little bit of that sound from Master of Puppets and Justice for All. Only this time you could hear the bass. It had like insane timing signatures. Like I was impressed that they could pull this off, being the age that they were when this album came out. Hardwire for Self-Destruct, a great album. I didn't like it as much as Death Magnetic. It was more of a mixed bag, but there's still a lot of good songs on there. So Metallica learned from that, and that is why they're only at number 5.
All right. My number 5 is going to be the band Bury Your Dead, a hardcore band. I can't recall where they're from. They started really picking up momentum when a lot of the metalcore was starting to get real popular. They had a shtick. The shtick was we dress as, like in Prohibition-style suits, and all of our songs are Tom Cruise movie titles. And for that first album, it worked. Then they went away and quit doing that, and they went into obscurity. It's not that like the album following was terrible. It's just when you tie yourself so closely to a fucking gimmick, when you try to pull away from that gimmick later, it could kill your whole career. Like the band Oakley Dokley, the whole Ned Flanders thing. What if they want to go real serious and all that type of shit? And they record something like that, and they take the glasses off and quit being Ned Flanders, and then people are like, okay, we're paying to see Ned Flanders' goofy metal band. I think that's the biggest thing that hurt Bury Your Dead is they nailed that gimmick good. That record was good, and they basically went from having their own look, their own kind of identity to, oh, now you're Throwdown. Oh, now you're another form of Hatebreed, So, yeah, they're pretty good. But as soon as they abandoned that, Bleeding Through ate their lunch. I mean, they just topped before them. So Bury Your Dead's my number 5. You're number 4.
On to number 4. It's a band that I know you've never liked, but I actually dug them in their earlier days. Trivium. Again, I found these guys back in like 2003, maybe 2002. An old roommate of mine introduced me to like their first album, not even the first album they did on a major label, but just their first album ever recorded. I loved it because it was real thrashy, heavy. This is in the days of nu metal, so you give me something that harkens back to that classic Bay Area sound, and they could do their own take on it, but something that has, chugging guitars with shredding solos and, double bass just, hammering away. I'm going to, be more willing to listen to that than a band with a DJ in it.
Yeah.
So, Trivium, their first album, at least the first one that I have, was really good. And then, they signed with a major label and came out with Ascendancy was a follow-up to that.
Who were they when they signed with that record label?
Oh, some obscure label. We don't need to talk about that.
Oh, we don't. There's going to be another video. You're going to notice a trend.
Anyway, that album was pretty good too. They adapted more of a metalcore sound. I could hear it, not too much where it became an obvious knockoff. The third album, The Crusade, that's where things took a turn. they watered down some of their songs. They took out all the screaming vocals, and the frontman, Matt Heffy, tried his best James Hetfield impression, which I didn't really feel worked for them.
Mm.
And a buddy of ours, Brady, actually, the guy who does our theme song, said they actually use the lyric skullfuck. He's like, that is just horrible.
Mm.
But then the album after that, Shogun, I thought was their best album because it took everything from their first two albums, the best part of the experimental stuff from that third album, and blended it together. And I'm like, this is a great album. Even if the lyrics get cheesy at times, like Into the Mouth of Hell We March, the lyrics are about being a sailor at sea. I'm like, none of these guys are sailors. So, but
Yeah.
the music was insane. I loved it. You know, just, you know, down to earth and everything. It seemed more genuine. It just seemed this is what these guys are trying to do. But nope, next album that came out, In Waves, was just, to me, a metalcore clone of every metalcore band out there. It opens with breakdowns, and it just did trendy stuff. And ever since then, they've been trying to find their way and tripping over themselves. They did, at one point, they were talking about doing a power metal type music, and another time they were trying to do like grindcore, at least according to interviews. After the couple albums that came out after Shogun, I just gave up on them.
All right. My number 4 is Life of Agony. This is another one of those bands that I don't think it was overt access that watered them down. If you listen to their first album, Ugly, to River Runs Red, all their albums really don't sound a lot alike. River Runs Red is one of my all-time favorite records, just period. It's a great record. Everyone should listen to it. It's just for them, since after River Runs Red, it's just they've not been able to capture the momentum because they do a lot of experimental stuff.
What was their second album?
Huh?
What was their second album?
Actually, River Runs Red. Their first album was Ugly. The third album, one that followed River Runs Red, was Soul Searching Sun, which was way more alterno metal-y. They had a couple good songs on there, like Weeds and
Weeds was a great song.
Yeah. Tangerine was a pretty good song, but the rest of it just sounded like stuff you'd hear on the radio. And Broken Valley had a couple decent songs at least on it, but it sounded more like just cookie cutter radio music.
What record label were they on?
Noticing a pattern. On that record label, you go from, at a certain point, when a certain style of music became popular, you go from being very creative and experimental and good to just cookie cutter crap. I wonder.
Who knows?
But that's for another video, maybe. Life of Agony would be my number 4. Your number 3.
My number 3, All That Remains.
Ooh.
I love the album Fall of Ideals. I thought it was a great metalcore album when it came out. It had even other influences in, like, you know, one of the songs was like straight up death metal, but it showed versatility in the band. Frontman Phil Labonte could go from really melodic singing to crooning to high screech screaming to death metal growls. I mean, this guy was very talented. The albums before that were good, but I think they hit their peak with Fall of Ideals. But then after that, after they got on Guitar Hero and they got more noticeable, the album that followed, Overcome, was not as good. It had a couple decent songs on it, but it just didn't feel like that same energy. And the longer it went on, the longer it just kept going, things were becoming more radio friendly. I'm like, I gotta admit, I gave up on them, you know, to the point where I only just recently found out one of the founding guitar players died back in 2018 because I just quit following them at all. It got to the point where their music, I stopped thinking of like the mosh pits at their older shows. I started thinking like, just people wearing like flat
Tap out
brim
T-shirts.
Monster. What?
People wearing tap out T-shirts.
Tap out T-shirts, like a flat brim Monster Energy drink hat, just like standing in front of the stage going, I'm like, this is, I weep for them. I'm like, to have made such a great album and to go to this. Counting all the days that deception was the game. On the every single day just to keep my promises. I cannot. It's just watered down radio rock, especially from a band that was so talented. I mean, like, yeah, I could say Five Finger Death Punch. I don't expect them to evolve. I don't expect them to have great music and then suck. I just kind of expect them to suck. But All That Remains had a great sound, and then they went to this.
Yeah. All right. So my number 3. Oh boy. We'll have to go with Dside. I like Dside. I know they're satanic as fuck. I know Glenn Benton hates religion.
Well, they wouldn't be satanic then. They'd be more atheists, right?
Well, either or. He's got an upside down cross branded on his forehead, which now looks a little weird because of all the wrinkles on his forehead because of old age. They started off.
People ask him what did he use to burn that cross in his head. He's like, that's the most asinine question I've ever heard.
But their first few albums were really, really killer. I at one point had Once Upon a Cross, which don't let your religious family see that record. Up to the live album, and then they got infected with what I call roadrunneritis. This record label sucks. They're a shit record label to fucking be on. They have expectations of metal bands that they shouldn't have. Hey, why don't you put a DJ in there? We're death metal. Hey, why don't you? No. They had Rob Flynn fucking rapping on records. They got him to do that. Fuck you.
Yeah, but Rob Flynn claims that was his idea.
Yeah, I buy that. I buy that. I know he's a lot more multicultural than a lot of other people in the metal community. He probably does listen to some rap music, which is fine. But no, you don't go from as heavy as they were to fucking cornrows in your fucking hair, wearing fucking track suits when Limp Bizkit is popular without the record label fucking pushing for that shit. Dside after right around the album Incineratum, they just started releasing shit records just to get off the record label with Roadrunner. And I think, after they got off Roadrunner and went to Earache, it was very appropriate. They released Scars of the Crucifix, which is a good record. But again, when you release shit records to get off a crappy record label, you're going to end up shooting yourself in the feet, and people are going to, not really be around. And I think by the time a little after Scars of the Crucifix comes out, age starts to set in. A couple of the records that came out after that were just okay at best. So yeah, Dside definitely got to hit that list, man. It's a up and down. At the two brothers that were in the band eventually getting fired at one point. So, and I believe one of them getting replaced with Jack Owen from Cannibal Corpse. They did good stuff with him, but still, I think it was like 3 or 4 records that they did just to get off a Roadrunner. That's shit.
Yeah.
Your turn.
Okay, well, at the number 2 spot, I got Rob Zombie.
Ooh, yeah.
And I'm not even talking the new stuff Rob Zombie put out compared to the stuff on Hellbilly Deluxe. I am talking the complete Rob Zombie solo stuff compared to White Zombie.
Well, what about his film career, his filmography too?
that's a video for another time. But no, we're talking.
One great film, bunch of bad.
Anyway, when he started his solo stuff, I'm like, it sounds like watered down White Zombie to me, only without that schizophrenic energy. If you listen to White Zombie, who has a bigger discography than people remember. People only remember 2 White Zombie albums because they're the ones that got radio play, but there were a lot of independent ones they did spanning back into the 80s. And they all sound great. They had that hardcore sound mixed with some psychedelic stuff. Someone once described White Zombie as the band, they wanted to write metal that women could dance to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that shows. When Rob Zombie started his solo stuff, you can definitely see it's like all what he wants. He's into 70s music and culture and everything like that. So it has to be a throwback to this. Samples thrown here and there. I'm not going to say his solo stuff didn't have anything that I liked. I liked he did a song with Ozzy called Ironhead, a little on the nose though, but that was a decent song to listen to. It's just you could definitely see what
the song Warzone on the Punisher soundtrack. That was a good song.
Yeah, I mean it was all right, but when you look at what White Zombie had and you look at the Rob Zombie solo stuff, you can see where in White Zombie it was a collective effort. He would throw his ideas out and then they'd come together as a band. Rob Zombie is all him, and it shows. I mean, it's not once reached that energy and that impact. And, you take a poll, most people are going to say, which do you like better, White Zombie or Rob Zombie? Most people are going to say White Zombie, at least most people that I've spoken to. And that says something.
Yeah. Well, it got so radio friendly. Like, I remember when there was a point in the early 90s, there were taboo bands that mainstream America were like, oh, they're popular, but they're evil. Manson was one of them. White Zombie used to be one of them. Now Rob Zombie is, I'm surprised he's not doing fucking art and stuff that's in cartoons and doing voiceovers for cartoon characters or whatever, It got so,
It did. I mean, I never thought Rob Zombie was a good lyricist. All his lyrics across both bands was just word salad. But in White Zombie, I didn't notice it as much because the music and everything just flowed together. It was tight, but it flowed together in a trippy way too. With Rob Zombie's solo stuff, and he's had some talented people. John Five as a guitar player. John Five's a great guitar player, but unfortunately, he needs other people up to that level to really pull everything together.
Well, at one point, he had a couple members of White Zombie with him.
Not really.
Oh, I thought he had a couple of them in there with him.
No, and I'll tell you,
Sean, which is the one that everyone fucking gives a shit about. So, other than him,
well, I mean, Ivan was a great guitar player too. But I'll tell you what really kind of I think threw everything off was, and this is shitty. This is really shitty. When he did the White Zombie box set, it was just him going in there deciding what was going to be in there and what wasn't. He didn't call anyone else.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, So yeah, Rob Zombie is my number 2 on the list.
My number 2 is going to be Morbid Angel. Because Jesus Christ, when they hit the brick wall, they hit it. Boom. They hit it.
Coyote.
So they started off really good with Altars of Madness, going up to their first few records.
Well, I mean, wasn't because Altars of Madness was my favorite album they did, and then I think Covenant people said was the highest selling death metal album.
Yeah, I like that one. Then Domination, or there was just There was they at one point went from a bass player lineup change that was also the front man. They went from David Vincent to Steve Tucker, and it still sounded pretty good. Then in about the mid 2000s, they released "Ill Eva." I'm gonna fuck up the title of that record because it's shit. When they brought David Vincent back, now poor David Vincent left Morbid Angel to do the Jenna Torturers, which was an industrial metal band. So when he comes
his wife,
yeah, when he comes back into Morbid Angel, there's an industrial element added to this shit. And the person who got the blame was David, when in all reality, Trey Asgoth wrote most of that shit. So all that fucking stupid shit that should never have been in there, it sounded like Power Man 5000 fucked a death metal band. It was bad.
There was an interview with Trey that I read where and it made me worry about that album because he's like, I've been listening to a lot of, industrial and techno music, not the mainstream stuff, this fucking primitive stuff, right? And I'm like, okay, don't put it on the album. And what did he do?
Just that.
Because their drummer wasn't able to record, and his name, I'm so pissed off right now. His name is, yeah, there we go. It was right there. I couldn't get it. He wasn't on the album, so they got the drummer from Hate Eternal,
who's a good drummer,
who was a great drummer, and then they got him playing like the Fruity Loops tracks and everything.
How the fuck do you? And that's the thing that gets me. Is at one point, and Steve Tucker is a great frontman, and David Vincent is.
Yeah, David Vincent was my favorite vocalist that they had.
How do you get some of the talent that you have? Like you got the drummer of Hate Eternal, and you're having him play this garbage on this Morbid Angel record, and we'll go on to their follow up. They did a live album after that, and they do a thing where every album starts with the letter of the alphabet. They go
alphabetical order.
Yeah. So we come to the album Kingdoms of Disdain, and it's just not good. It's just like, where do I begin? The recording sounded shitty. The compositions of the songs sounded bad. Pete Sandoval, I guess he's now a born again Christian. He'll never play any of that stuff again. Which that's gotta fucking hurt.
Because again, I quit following them when because you're the one that showed me that album.
Oh yeah, the one with Kill a Cop, Kill a Cop, Kill a Cop.
You came over to my place and you couldn't even keep a straight face. I could tell you had been yelling, but then you kind of like went into laughing fits, and you're like, "Hey, how do you think Morbid Angel's new album sounds?" And I'm like, "I hope it's good." You're like, "You're wrong," and then you put it on. I'm just like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, it's like them and 6 Feet, man. It was like when they hit the brick wall, man. Like I said with Dside, when Scars of the Crucifix came out, they sounded a lot better on Earache, and they had a couple more that still sounded pretty good. But good God, when the 6 Feet and Morbid hit that fucking wall, man, it was like boom. It's like, what the fuck were you guys thinking? With Barnes, what the fuck were you smoking? So, yeah, my number 2, Morbid Angel.
All right. Well, with my number 1, and I think really most people could agree that when you think of a band whose older stuff was better and that could never quite recapture that same magic, I don't think anyone could disagree with me on my number 1 pick, Guns N' Roses.
Ooh.
Yeah, they had one of the best debuts that any band has ever had with Appetite for Destruction. An album that's so good, it's still referenced to this day.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, they were not able to follow it up in a proper way. After Appetite for Destruction, they released a double album, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. And Slash even said, you really only need one of those discs.
Mm-hmm.
You really only need one. because Axl's a big fan of Elton John. So now we have to throw pianos in here, and we got to bring a symphony in here, and Slash and Duff are like, we just, we want to be a rock band. Just let us rock. Let's not go for this pretentious bullshit. Axl's ego took over, forced a lot of members out. The first casualty of that was Steven Adler. After that, they did an EP called The Spaghetti Incident.
Ooh.
Which was mainly covers. In fact, really the only song I listened to on there, they did a cover of the Misfits song Attitude with Duff singing, I believe. Inside that beat up brain, there's gotta be a whore. If you don't shut your mouth, you gotta feel fucking fly. Other than that album held nothing for me. Then Guns N' Roses just kind of fell off the face of the earth until about 1999. They released one song for the Arnold film End of Days. It's called Oh My God. And I think that's what a lot of people said when they heard it, because it was industrial sounding. Axl's vocals were all disoriented. And I know you could use that effect on certain bands. Some bands like Bile have really done well with it. Guns N' Roses is not a band that you would think would need those kinds of effects. So it rubbed people the wrong way. And then Axl for, years and years kept promising our next album's going to be called Chinese Democracy. He promised this in 94. The album didn't drop till 2008, I think.
And it was a turd. It was bad.
It was horrible. I think actual democracy in China would have, been more plausible than this album succeeding. It opens up with the title track, which sounds like a typical Guns N' Roses song. Nothing special, but, it's about what you expect. And then it just takes a left turn into, what the fucksville. You get one track that sounds like the Murder Dolls, because it's got like this kind of industrial sound. And I'm like, well, this sucks. He does a song that reminds me like a tribute to Earth, Wind, and Fire, because it's kind of funky. It's just, this album didn't know what it wanted to be. And I'm like, the hype for this, and this is what we got. And really, when you think about it, nothing that they have done has ever been as good as Appetite for Destruction. It didn't have the energy. It didn't have the passion. It didn't have that dangerous quality to it. Nothing. I think, Velvet Revolver had 2 albums that were better than every other Guns N' Roses album.
Yeah.
So, Guns N' Roses to me has to be the number one band that. And like their old stuff, their one album was better than anything else they ever came out with.
Here's how bad Chinese Democracy is. Okay. It's so bad. I had a roommate that lived in LA at the time. And again, the thing about Guns N' Roses, they are a big LA band. Mm-hmm. And when that thing came out, no one could even pretend that it was listenable in LA, he told me. He was like, it was just a trashy,
Well, I'll tell you. So I listened to that album from start to finish because the bass player from my band at the time, who lived above me, got 2 copies of that because he was a huge Guns N' Roses fan. And he bought a copy, and someone gave him a copy. So they trapped. So I'm listening to it, and as soon as the album was done, I opened up my CD player, just took it out, and frisbeed it across the living room. Like, I'm never listening to that again.
It's such a trashy. All right, ready for my number one?
Who's your number one?
Huh? I hate to say it, but Sepultura, man. I love Sepultura. I love them. We all do. Beneath the Remains is a classic record. Fucking Chaos AD and Against, great records. You can have a debate about Roots. Okay, you can have a debate about that record. They're a band that I think when the Calviaro brothers left, it took both of them, and they both left at different increments. Mm-hmm. Igor was in there a little bit longer than Max, but it took the wins completely.
When Max left, I thought the band was over. I'm like,
Yeah.
there's how are you going to continue on without Max Cavalera?
Yeah, well, again, he wasn't the original frontman
No,
on
but
Schizophrenia.
he became like, you thought Sepultura, you thought Max Cavalera.
Yeah.
Now they got a new frontman in Derek Green.
Yeah, who's big as fuck and very intimidating.
Well, I'm going to say he wasn't bad. I mean, when you listen to what was the album that came out like when I was a senior, it had Jason Newsted on it.
Against, yeah.
Again, that was a pretty good album. It wasn't what typical. Everyone wanted Max back in the band, but for a guy stepping into an established band's, spotlight, Derek Green, I thought did a good job on that album.
Yeah, it's just, it sounds like two different bands, and when you take you take two of the bands like biggest musical creators out, it takes the wind out of your fucking sails. I mean, they were doing stuff on Chaos AD and Against that was really testing the waters. That was really, experimental at one point. The tribal drum sounds, and they continued that on with Roots. My issue wasn't that. My issue with Roots is the nu metal element to it. My view is Roots is still don't touch Beneath the Remains, Chaos AD, or fucking Against, even in the slightest,
or even Arise.
Yeah, Arise. I meant Arise. Sorry, but it's just like it's not terrible, but it's not great. It's not, and I will say this about Sepultura is one of those bands that, yeah, their musical quality went downhill, but I mean, you have some bands like Guns N' Roses. They had one great record, a decent record, and then just shit. At least with Sepultura, you got three really fucking classic records. You can have a debate about Roots. My view is it doesn't touch those three records, but they still had a longer span of good before it went kind of downhill.
So you're saying that my number one is the number one?
Oh yeah, your number one's way worse than mine. I mean, it's like you can't debate that. You can't even, if you're a rock music fan or a metal fan, you can't even make the debate that anything after Use Your Illusion by Guns N' Roses was fucking worth a fuck. You just can't.
You could make the debate that half the stuff on Use Your Illusion wasn't worth a fuck.
Yeah. But I mean, still, that was a decent record. But I mean, like after that, I mean, Chinese Democracy is one of the worst metal records of all time.
Would you call it a metal record?
I call it Axl's ego record. That's what it is. It's terrible. It's unfucking listenable. It's like you go to show up to listen to Guns N' Roses, and what you get is a bad fucking mall rock cover band that has no guidance doing what they're doing. Hey, what are we gonna do now? I don't know. Let's do funk. Never did that before. Album's fucking horrible. I think here with this list that we just did, this 5v5 that we just did, you have three of the worst metal records came from these 10 bands. Metallica, Saint Anger, Morbid Angels, Ill Little But Fuck Me, and then fucking Chinese Democracy. Those are three of the worst records ever recorded in metal. I don't give a shit. I don't fucking care. No new metal band could be worse than those fucking three records.
Hey, hold on. Limp Bizkit will say, "Hold my White Claw."
Oh yeah. You got Golden Cobra. That one's fucking terrible too.
Well, we didn't have any expectations from Limp Bizkit because across the board their albums are horrible.
Yeah, but I mean, like seriously, that's three fucking atrocious records, and everyone had to know that it was going to be bad. Somebody, it's It's like
Yeah,
Vince Neil get in the car
I
after.
know because you're having a hard time expressing it.
Well, it's like when you see Vince Neil get in the car after having a couple wine coolers. You're like, no, get the keys from him. We know how this is going to end. But
Wow.
Yeah,
right,
Generations
well,
One
there
was a
you
bad
have it.
record too. But Motley Crue.
Thank you for that. So there you have it. Our 5v5 bands whose older stuff was much better than their newer stuff. If you feel
Yeah.
like we forgot any, if you want to tell us what your 5v5 would be, if you want to tell us who your number one would be, if it's a band, if it's not Guns N' Roses, I'll be amazed. Let us know in the comments section below. If you like this video, if you kind of like this madness with Chris probably getting us kicked off of here, please subscribe to the channel while you can. Follow us on social media. We got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Chris, do you want to add anything? Do I dare let you add anything?
Besides, what the fuck were you guys thinking? like with Life of Agony, they're experimental as fuck. You know, they come in waves, okay? But Chinese Democracy, Saint Anger, and Ill of it, fuck that album. That's what I'm going to call that. I'm just going to call it Morbid Angel, fuck that album. You had a group of professionals sit there and listen to that afterwards, and nobody said delete that like Lars' dad did. Lars' dad needs to apply for sainthood, and we need to put him in every kind of just to put a stop to bad records, man.
Right. We need Tobin Ulrich to help produce all the albums.
Hey, at least he was honest with his fucking son. Yeah, son, that's shit. Delete that. Because it was.
Well, there you have it. So, from the Adam and Chris Show, I'm Saint Adam, not Saint Anger.
Yeah, ooh. And I'm Chris Malice. Saint Anger sucked. Oh, and another caveat. Poor Lou Reed's last record. Okay? That poor guy's last record was that shit he did with Metallica.
He wrote that album. They were just his backup band. But you know what? That's a video for another time. From the Adam and Chris Show, I'm Saint Adam. That's Chris Malice. We'll see you later.